Like imagine you are just the raw, heavy machinery and the fuel, the actual fire making you move, has to be piped in entirely from the outside.
Which is a terrifying thought for a lot of people.
Oh, it really is. Because if that external fire is ever cut off, you don't just slow down to take a break, you are completely dead in the water.
Right.
And that brings us to today's source material. Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we are cracking open excerpts from Volume 6 of the Book of Heaven, which is a collection of translated diary entries by the mystical writer Luisa Piccarreta.
Also known as the little daughter of the divine will.
Yes, exactly. And we're focusing specifically on these intense entries from late 1903 to early 1906. It's this period where her mystical visions, conversations with Jesus, and these really dark apocalyptic warnings just hit an absolute fever pitch.
They really do. And whether you approach this material as, literal theology, a complex psychological metaphor, or just historical mysticism, it offers this breathtakingly rigorous framework for understanding the human condition.
Right. Our mission today is to extract the core insights from this really dense text. We want to explore its radical perspective on the human soul, the hidden value of suffering, and cosmic justice. Because the way this text reconstructs everyday mechanics is going to completely upend that modern idea of the self-made individual we just talked about.
It's a total deconstruction of the self. I mean, it takes our everyday experiences, frustration, pain, ambition, and maps them onto this massive cosmic grid.
And before we can even touch the macro-cosmic drama in this text, like the prophecies of Europe collapsing, we have to understand that foundational grid first.
Absolutely.
So going to the November 1st, 1903 entry, the text gives us this incredibly vivid image of the soul as a little steamboat.
A steamboat. Right.
Yeah. The life of a human being is the boat, but it's fire alone that allows it to move. In this framework, that fire is strictly the love of God. If the fire is raging, the boat flies above the earth. If it's small, it crawls, dragging itself through the mud.
And if the fire goes out, it's motionless.
Completely dead to anything divine.
Which brings us to the companion metaphor the text uses shortly after, which I think might actually be even more challenging to modern ears.
Oh, the container.
Yes, the container. It describes the human creature as a little container filled with a dose of all the divine particles. But there's a massive vulnerability built into this design.
Because it can leak.
Exactly. If material things, so worldly attachments, anxieties, mundane obsessions, if they are allowed to enter this container, the divine particles literally leak out to make room for the matter. Two different substances just cannot occupy the same space.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because my immediate reaction to the container metaphor is that it sounds like an impossible, almost punishing demand.
How so?
Well, if I am just a steamboat totally dependent on outside fuel or a container that leaks the divine the second I think about my mortgage, isn't that incredibly passive?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a material reality. We have jobs, we have families, we have to eat. If engaging with the material world drains the divine, how is this not just a recipe for total paralysis?
What's fascinating here is that the text actually anticipates that exact pushback. It views this detachment not as a passive, empty void,
Yeah.
but as the only actual path to operational freedom.
Operational freedom.
Yeah, it's not demanding that you stop interacting with the material world. It's demanding that you stop letting the material world agitate your internal environment.
Meaning what, exactly? Because, if my boss is yelling at me, my internal environment is going to be agitated.
Sure. But think of the analogy the text uses regarding peace. It likens the soul to a river exposed to the sun.
Okay.
If the river is perfectly calm, you can look down into the water and see a flawless reflection of the sun and the heavens, right? The water is holding the image of the sky.
Right.
But if a strong wind blows and ripbles the water, the sun is still shining, but the reflection is shattered. You see nothing but confusion.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The material things entering the container, they are the wind. It's not the physical act of doing your job that drains the divine. It's the anxiety, the ego, the worldly attachment you attach to the job that ripples the water.
So it's a bit like a smartphone with a bunch of useless apps running in the background.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, the fire is draining rapidly, not because the phone is broken, but because all this hidden material processing is eating up the bandwidth. The text is demanding you force quit those background apps to maintain a pristine internal environment.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. And the mechanism to force quit those apps, according to this text, is resignation.
Resignation.
Right. The text claims that for involuntary human imperfections, those moments of coldness or distraction, just one act of perfect resignation to the divine will is enough to purge the soul.
It's just one act.
Yes, because resignation acts as a cosmic filter. When you resigned your will to the divine, it sweeps through the container, flushing out the material debris and stabilizing the water so it can reflect the sun again.
But okay, and if the soul is this highly sensitive vessel that only operates at peak efficiency when it's perfectly still, we have to talk about the elephant in the room.
The pain.
Yes. Human life is packed with unavoidable, agonizing pain. And this is where Volume 6 absolutely flips our modern understanding of suffering on its head. It doesn't just tolerate pain, it turns it into a literal legal transaction.
It really does. It elevates suffering from a biological or emotional misfortune into the highest form of cosmic jurisprudence.
Yeah, the text explicitly defines the cross, which in this context means any suffering, hardship, or humiliation as a legal citation.
Like a notification to pay a debt.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? It's like the universe is issuing a cosmic subpoena. We usually think of a sudden illness or a massive life failure as a punishment or just terrible luck. But this text argues it's actually a legal loophole offered by a judge to bypass a much harsher trial later on.
The mechanics of that loophole are just fascinating. The text states that if the soul accepts this citation with resignation, the cross itself transforms.
It changes completely.
Right, it stops being the instrument of torture and becomes your advocate and judge, actively helping you inherit the eternal kingdom.
Wow.
But if you reject the citation, if you fight the subpoena, so to speak, you throw yourself into an abyss of worldly troubles and eventually face the absolute rigor of the actual unmitigated judge.
I have to admit, calling a period of intense suffering a loophole sounds almost masochistic to modern ears.
It definitely can sound that way.
There's even a section where the cross is given the title of a feast day, a joyful gift from the Creator. We are telling people who are in pain that they should celebrate the subpoena. How do we square that with any healthy psychological framework?
You square it by understanding the text definition of reigning. Suffering, in this framework, is not passive victimization.
It's not just taking the abuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is not about letting people abuse you or wallowing in misery. The text explicitly says suffering makes the soul a pontiff, priest, king. By accepting the subpoena, the soul exercises an active dominion over its own passions.
Oh, I see.
You stop being a slave to your instinctual desire for comfort. You put yourself in order, and by doing so, you become a king of yourself.
You take ownership of the pain rather than letting the pain own you. You convert it into capital.
Capital is the exact right word, because this is an economy. The text lays out a very specific economic principle. When two people share the weight of a heavy labor, they must share the compensation.
That makes sense.
Therefore, by voluntarily sharing in the sufferings of Christ, the individual literally participates in the gain of the work of redemption. Pain is the currency. The more you suffer willingly without letting the wind ripple your river, the more capital you generate to purchase grace for yourself and, crucially, for others.
Which places an incredible amount of agency back into the hands of the individual. You aren't just enduring a random tragedy, you are minting divine coin.
Minting divine coin. I like that.
And this economy of suffering isn't just some broad, poetic concept. The source material reveals a fascinating, almost obsessive divine mathematics behind human struggles. It is highly calculated down to the smallest variable.
The precision is relentless. I mean, there is absolutely zero room for randomness in this theology.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Jesus explains to Louisa that almost all the pains he suffered during his passion occurred in threes.
The triples.
Yes. The September 26, 1904 entry. 3 hours of agony in the garden. 3 types of lashes during the scourging. 3 falls under the weight of the cross. Condemned 3 times. And the text reveals this wasn't just symbolic poetry, it was a highly explicit mathematical formula specifically designed to repair the 3 powers of the human soul.
The intellect, the memory, and the will.
Exactly.
Which, requires us to look at how this theology diagnoses human failure. Why those 3 powers?
Right. Why those 3 specifically?
Because every single human wrong stems from a corruption in that triad. Intellect is how we perceive reality and truth. Memory is the database of our past experiences, and will is the engine of our choices.
So to use our earlier analogy, when a system fails, it's because the intellect gets blinded by pride, the memory becomes obsessed with holding on to past slights, and the will becomes paralyzed by selfishness.
They're corrupted sectors on a hard drive.
Yes. And the triple sufferings are the precise lines of code needed to patch those specific bugs in the operating system.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, This absolute divine math means that literally nothing in your life is wasted, not even your most humiliating personal failures.
That's a comforting thought, honestly.
It is. The text has this striking entry where Louisa is lamenting her own miseries and human weaknesses. And the divine response is to liken human miseries to manure.
Which is a very humbling visual.
It really is. The text says that someone who doesn't understand agriculture would think a farmer is crazy for smearing the earth with filthy manure. But one who understands knows that the filth our human miseries and daily failings actually serves to fecundate the earth.
So the virtues can grow.
Right. Without that manure, the most beautiful virtues would have no nutrient-rich soil in which to root. The miseries are literally part of the calculation.
I love that. It means the next time I completely blow a presentation at work or lose my temper in traffic, I can just tell myself I am accumulating premium spiritual compost. But the scale of this math is staggering. There's the vision of the sea where Louisa tries to count her acts of love to match the drops of water or the grains of sand. She realizes she can't even comprehend the number.
Right. It's impossible for her.
And Jesus basically calls her silly for marveling at it, telling her that while it's impossible for a human, he has numbered, weighed, and evaluated every single individual drop of water in the ocean. The Creator knows every byte of data in the universe, so the legal patch is mathematically flawless.
But, that mathematical flawlessness introduces a terrifying variable.
Oh, here we go.
If the system is perfectly calibrated, if the pain is a perfect legal citation designed to patch the soul, what happens when humanity collectively rejects the subpoena?
This is where Volume 6 shifts gears completely. It moves from these incredibly intimate internal mechanics of the soul, the steamboats and the manure, to some genuinely terrifying macro-level prophecies. If the individual refuses to force quit the background apps and accept the suffering, the consequences scale up to geopolitics.
It becomes a massive study in cosmic cause and effect, and the text pulls no punches about who is to blame.
No, it doesn't. We see visions of Europe engulfed in bloody slaughter and wars. But the text makes this shocking claim in August 1904. It says the first to persecute the church, the ones who kick off this institutional collapse, won't be secular society or outside enemies.
It will be the religious leaders themselves.
Right. As impartial reporters of this text, we have to note how brutal this indictment is. The text describes them as pretending to be shepherds, but actually being poisonous snakes in disguise, who poison themselves and the people they are supposed to lead.
It describes priests on a road biting one another like little dogs, completely stripped of any supernatural light to know the truth.
Which begs the question, why them? If this system is based on divine particles and perfect math, why do the institutional leaders fall first and hardest?
Well, go back to the metaphor of the container. Religious leaders, by nature of their vocation, are depicted as containers entrusted with a massive dose of divine particles.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right, remember the rule. If material things enter the container, the divine leaks out. When an institution built on the divine becomes obsessed with material power, wealth, or politics, the leakage is catastrophic.
Yeah.
The higher the calling, the harder the fall.
And the vacuum left behind isn't just empty.
No, it becomes filled with the venom the text describes.
But this institutional rot isn't happening in a vacuum. It triggers a massive geopolitical collapse. Amid all these visions of wars in Europe, the text places an impossible burden on Louisa. It says that all of Europe rests on her shoulders.
A literal victim soul.
Yes, if she isn't constant in her suffering, if she doesn't generate enough of that painful currency we talked about, Europe will literally be invaded. She has to beg God the Father for mercy amid these visions, and there's an actual negotiation that takes place. God tells her that for love of her, instead of doing 10, I will do 5.
This raises an important question, perhaps the central tension of the entire volume. How do we reconcile this brutal, almost transactional justice with the loving Creator who gently numbers the drops of the ocean? It sounds like a deity holding a hostage.
I was going to push back on exactly that, saying, I'll only destroy half the continent if you suffer more. That sounds like a supervillain negotiation, not divine love. How is this not just an arbitrary, vengeful punishment?
Because, according to the text, the punishment isn't arbitrary at all. It is the physics of morality.
The physics of morality.
Yes. The text explains that sin is a fire and divine justice is a fire. But justice must remain pure. So when the profane, corrupting fire of human sin tries to rise up and unite with divine justice, justice naturally repels it.
Like a magnet.
Or a mirror, it acts like a mirror, rejecting the profane fire and pouring it back over the earth. The sin itself is converted into the fire of chastisement.
So God isn't sitting on a cloud throwing lightning bolts because he's angry. Humanity is throwing the lightning bolts upward, and they are simply bouncing off the shield of divine justice and hitting the ground.
Exactly. Wait, taking that a step further, it means humanity is doing this to itself. If we refuse to accept the internal fire of divine love to power our steamboat, we generate the fire of sin. Justice must balance the mathematical equation.
Ah, the math again.
Right. And this is why the concept of the victim's soul, Louise's role, is so critical. The victim's soul volunteers to act as a cosmic lightning rod. They absorb that fire of chastisement internally, enduring the suffering as a legal proxy, so that the fire doesn't have to strike the earth globally.
They pay the subpoena on behalf of the whole society.
Yes. And that negotiation, God going from 10 to 5, reveals that mercy is constantly looking for a legal reason to mitigate justice. It uses the willing suffering of the individual as the legal tender to reduce the sentence.
It all routes back to that economy. The currency has to be paid, the debt of human corruption will be settled. The only variable is whether it's paid quietly by the individual through love, resignation, and accepting the cross, or if it's paid violently by society through chaos, war, and institutional collapse.
It is an incredibly heavy framework, but it demands that you completely reconsider the weight of your everyday choices, how you react to a minor inconvenience, how you handle physical pain, what motivations you allow into your internal container. None of it is trivial. It all registers on the cosmic scale.
We have covered some profound ground today. We started with the quiet internal mechanics of the soul as a little steamboat entirely dependent on an external fire to move.
We did.
We looked at the necessity of force-quitting our material attachments so our container can actually hold the divine without leaking. We explored a demanding worldview where suffering is never random, but a calculated legal citation, a subpoena that can become our greatest advocate if we accept it.
And we unpacked the flawless divine math of the triples, meant to specifically patch the bugs in our intellect, memory, and will. We learned that even our worst miseries can be the manure that grows our virtues. And finally, we stared down the macro-level consequences when that math is ignored. The chilling physics of morality, where the fire of sin bounces back as chastisement, held at bay only by the grueling negotiations of those willing to suffer in our place.
It changes the way you look at a bad day, doesn't it? Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. We've talked extensively about economies, transactions, and cosmic currency. But there is an entry right around the Feast of the Magi in January 1904 that brings this vast, intimidating theology down to a very intimate question.
Oh, this is a great point to end on.
In the text, Jesus is explaining the gifts of the Magi, and he says that the true gold he wants from us isn't material wealth or grand worldly accomplishments. The gold he actually desires is the spiritual gold of our will, our affections, and our desires.
The internal currency.
Exactly. So think about the implications of that in your own life. If your free will, your ability to choose what you love and what you desire, is the ultimate, most valuable currency of the cosmos, a currency so precious that even the creator of the universe refuses to take it from you by force, what are you trading yours for every single day?
That is definitely something to sit with.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, you might just be the machinery, but you are the one who gets to choose what kind of fire you let into your engine. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.